Hello, hello! I am back, Peregrine Papercrafts, back in action. It's been a little while, and what I was hoping to do was to have a look at all the different mediums that you can use with bullet journals or diaries, things like that, and how they work on the Hobonichi paper. It's a special paper, it has a name, I can't remember what it is because I didn't prepare before this video apart from getting all of the things out and placing them, but it's a special quality paper. It's supposed to be really great. I've seen people even watercolour on this. Now, I'm intrigued to know how I can manage to stamp on the Hobonichi paper. I am going to Canada in a couple months, and I was so excited because I got this cute little lawn fawn stamp set that had a little heart with the Canadian flag in it, and I thought, yes, I'm going to stamp that on each of the days I'm in Canada. I stamped it with Memento Ink, with a red one of those, and it bled. It bled right through the page, and I was really disappointed. But I thought what I'll do is I'll use the extra paper in my Hobonichi Mega Weeks to test out a few markers. I've got a few because I enjoy a bit of hand lettering, so I've got a few markers there, test out how that goes, and make it so that it's accessible for people, because I haven't really seen anyone out there doing swatches. Please, in the comments, do not link to every single video of someone doing swatches on a Hobonichi. I haven't extensively researched that, but I haven't seen them in a very sort of accessible, user-friendly way. Okay, so I think we should start with the ink pads. So I've got a couple of stamps here. These stamps are from... I don't know if you'll be able to see them. It's a little hexagon. I'll tell you what. Right, hold on 1 second. I have the stamp set here. It is... Oh, I think I just jiggled the camera. So it is this Concord and 9th set. It's a larger set. It's called Bits and Pieces. And I love it. Absolutely love it. It's brand spanking new. I've not managed to use it. Well, I've used these little sentiments on it. Well, I haven't used Yum, but I've used these on making a card set for my mum for her birthday. But other than that, sorry, the cat's clawing up the carpet. Other than that, I haven't used it at all. I haven't used the two stamps I'm using are this hexagon one here and this hello. So I thought those would be quite good because the hexagon one has varying layers. It's almost supposed to be almost like a watercolor kind of design of a shape, and the hello is quite bold. So we can use that to see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a piece of cardstock, just a really thin piece of cardstock, behind the paper, so if it bleeds through it won't ruin the other pages. Right, should we find the beginning? Should we just pick a random page? Let's just pick a random page. Right, so let's start here. Put the cardstock behind it. And I'm going to start with Distress Oxide ink. It's a special ink. It's a hybrid between pigment and dye ink. It has this amazing effect when you use water on it, where it sort of oxidizes and makes it this cloudy, kind of chalky... I can't really describe it. You'd have to see it to know what you mean, but it stamps beautifully. I've just realised I don't think I have my baby wipes handy. I might have to pause and get them. Make sure this is fully inked up. This is the first time I'm stamping this, so it might be a bit patchy. Okay, I'm not entirely sure that let's do second generation. You see? And you can see it there. It's already starting to bleed through the page. It's bled through onto the cardstock behind it. There we go. It's bled through onto the cardstock behind it. The second generation is doing okay, so it could be that second gen... Oh, and it's where the ink stayed a bit wet, it's gone through onto the other side. Right, I'm going to pause very quickly while I find my baby wipe so I can clean off my stamp. Right, I'm back. I couldn't find my baby wipes, but I did find my Lawn Fawn stamp chamois, which looks absolutely repulsive because it's been overused, but it's still working. It will still clean this stamp perfectly. It's almost like a chamois you'd use for your car, but it's really handy. So I'll just put that there. Okay, so Distress Oxide is a no-go, really. Regular Distress Ink is my next thing. So this is a dye-based ink, reactive with water in the same way that the entire Distress line is. If you'd like to learn more about sort of inks and stamping and that side of things, I'm more than happy to go into it. I do paper crafting and cardmate, hence Peregrine Paper Crafts. Doy. And I'm only, well, I'm not starting out with stamping and everything, but I'm only starting out with the whole YouTube thing just now. Now, Distress ink isn't the best for stamping. It's not ideal. Ah, that's bled through again. Give me a moment. Right, so regular Distress ink again, not a, now it's staying wet for a very long time on this paper, and I've actually found this with markers, or not, I haven't used markers as such, but even ballpoints. I've used the thicker Staedtler, I think they're a 0.3 millimeter, they might be more than that, I'm not sure. So I've used those on there, and I have to really wait, or I have to blot at it, even using the Zebra mild liners. They as well, they stay wet for just that little bit. Actually, the mild liners are okay. It's the friction. It's the friction. It doesn't matter. It's the friction that stay wet for longer. And I actually find myself getting a piece of kitchen roll or a tissue and wiping, blotting at the paper to make sure that I can just move on to the next. And to be fair, I'm quite impatient, and I don't really enjoy that. The Hobonichis themselves are great, fabulous. There's a lot of ghosting on the page, but you know, it's thin paper, it's a special paper. It holds up to the pens that I've used on it very well. So this is Rich Raspberry Stampin' Up dye ink. I'm just trying to go with a lot of different inks. I know most of them will have a very similar or the same formula. And I'm not even trying to use this solid hello stamp if it's already bleeding through on this hexagon. I don't see the point, to be perfectly honest. Right, let's see. Okay, that looks a little less wet, and it hasn't bled through quite as much. So I don't know if you can see, it bled through a little bit. It's not quite as, there we go, it's not quite as bad as the Distress, which is interesting. So again, that's just a regular water-based dye ink. Oh God, I'm making a mess over there, aren't I? So that was, is that Rich Raspberry? That doesn't look like Rich Raspberry. That looks like, yeah, Cherry Cobbler. See, I know my inks. Well, clearly not well enough, because then I wouldn't have said it was Rich Raspberry in the first place. But, so that's a Cherry Cobbler ink. And now you'll see that my stamp is getting a bit dyed. It's not quite as clear as it once was, and that's fine. Good quality stamps will do that. It won't, like if I then try and stamp, it's not transferring the ink, it's just dyed it a little bit. And it's mainly because of the pigment in the quality of inks that I'm using, as well as the porous quality of the stamp. Now this is Hero Art Shadow Ink. This is a hybrid ink. Don't ask me what it's a hybrid between. People just call them hybrid inks. And it's one that's supposed to smooth out over time. So it will start out potentially looking blotchy. Now this stamp isn't supposed to look perfectly smooth. It's supposed to give a sort of rustic feel. But let's see how this does. Now this is the charcoal colour, I think. Yeah, so that's charcoal. All right. That's bled through. I'd actually say that's bled through with more consistency than the Distress Ink did. So this is really disappointing. How am I going to stamp in this? I was really looking forward to stamping in this. Okay, I might have to get creative with how I do this. And you'll see now it's really dyed, but there's no ink left on there, so that's fine. Next, I've got the Memento. I already, oh sorry, out of camera. I already know that this doesn't stamp incredibly well in that it bleeds through, but just for the evidence of it, this is it Danube or Danube? Danube? I'd probably say Danube. Danube Blue. Danube Blue. Yes, I'm very, very posh with my diction when I'm saying that. Okay, that's a really pretty blue actually. I don't know if I mentioned, that was Lucky Clover with the Distress Oxide. That was Blueprint Sketch. This was just the regular Distress. This is Stampin' Up Cherry Cobbler, Hero Art Shadow Ink in Charcoal, and this is Danube Blue in Memento. Now, again, you can see it's bled through quite a lot. The Hero Arts is actually bleeding through the more that it's left, which is really quite disappointing. I've seen people watercolour on this paper, so I had this idea that I'd be able to, it didn't even cross my mind that I wouldn't be able to stamp on this. So I'm quite intrigued. I might try watercolouring in a different video. In fact, I might actually do the markers in a different video and have this one just be the ink cubes. Right. Now that's very juicy. Oh, that's pretty. What colour is that? That is Emerald by Altenew. Altenew Crisp, I don't know, can you see that? Ooh. Not really. Altenew Crisp Ink in Emerald. It's a very pretty colour. Let's see how you go. Oh, look at that. Oh, it's nice. And it's bled through. It's not bled through quite as much. So far, the most successful ones have been the Stampin' Up Cherry Cobbler and the second generation of the Lucky Clover. Now, can you see the shine on this? You see the shine on those? See? Now that's why the ink is still wet. So if I look, that's been a very long time. Now the Distress Inks are supposed to last a bit longer before drying on the page, but that's a very long time. The Mementos are supposed to be very quick. Now that's already dry. The Shadow Inks by Hero Arts are also supposed to be very quick. I thought Stampin' Up would have dried by now. And the Altenew inks are also a hybrid ink, is my understanding, and that looks like that's drying a bit quicker. And I've just messed up this one at the top, but you saw it. If you want to see it all perfect, you can always just rewind the video. Here we've got a pigment ink. This is Pearlescent Orchid. It's a brilliant dew drop. I think it's also made by Sukaneko, who make the Memento inks as well. So, if memory serves. Now, as pigment ink, it should be very, very highly pigmented, hence the name, but also it tends to sit on top of paper rather than being absorbed into it. Now, this is the Brilliance. That hasn't bled through at all. That hasn't bled through at all. You can see the ghosting, but you can always see the ghosting, but that hasn't bled. Now, that's interesting. So I could have nice, and the thing that's nice about the Brilliance is they have a shimmer, to like a pearlescent shimmer to them. I'm not sure if the camera's going to pick that up. I can see a little bit. So that's fine. I've got a small selection of these. That's doable. I mean, it's not ideal, but it's doable. And then I've got one more ink to try, and then I think I'll wrap up and I'll do the markers in a different video. So this is the Encore Ultimate Metallic Blue Ink. I think this is also a pigment ink. It's hard to say. It's not that hard to say. I've just had a very long day at work. Right, let's put this guy under here. Now that as well, it hasn't stamped incredibly, the coverage hasn't been amazingly great, but it hasn't bled through, which is very, very interesting. So what I'll do now is put this away, because I don't want my ink pads to dry out. So, God, the phone's creating a shadow. So these are all of the inks. We've got the Oxide ink in the Distress line, we've got the regular Distress line ink, we've got the Stampin' Up Cherry Cobbler, which is still wet. We've got the, oh, you can really see the pearlescence in the Brilliance now. We've got the Hero Art Shadow Ink, the Memento Danube Blue Ink, we've got the Emerald Altenew Ink, the Pearlescent Orchid Brilliance, and the Encore Blue ink. And then you can see all of the bleeding through there. So the worst one clearly was the Hero Art Shadow. That has just developed over time. The best one I would say was probably the Encore, but it didn't have very good coverage, so I don't know how amazingly well it would work sort of en masse. And then it would be the Brilliance. Then I'd probably say, well, it'd be the second generation Distress Oxide, which did give pretty good coverage, really. Then the Stampin' Up, then mildly the Memento is a bit better than the Altenew, and the, I'm saying it's about a tie between, this is sort of a bit less. So then the Distress Oxide, then the charcoal. So not entirely the best. I might see what other inks Encore do, or if maybe other pigment inks other than the Distress Oxide. I don't have very many pigment inks, so that would be interesting. It'd be an excuse to buy some Avery Earl or some Mama Elephant inks. So that's that. This is the swatch test for different inks and stamping in a Hobonichi. It's not incredibly successful, but I will be doing more investigation into how I can possibly make this work. I think it's a big part of planning, and particularly if you don't like drawing, having a stamp set can really sort of liven things up, and you can do your colouring and all sorts. So it's quite important to me to see if I can find a way to make this paper work. Otherwise it's a pretty big turn off for me with the Hobonichis, I'm sad to say, but I've been enjoying using them still. And I'm still going to carry on. You can probably hear the cat in the background. I'm so sorry. I'm probably going to carry on using them. I'm going to sign off here and say thank you very much for watching, especially if you stuck with me for that entire thing, including the pausing to get the stamp chamois and all sorts. So thank you for watching. Have a fabulous day if you're not already. And I'll see you for the next video, where I look at how these variety of markers fare up on this paper. Bye!